Alrighty, well, it's 45 minutes past the hour, so we're going to kick off. Welcome everyone to GreenBiz 21 and to this panel, aligning plastic and packaging strategy. Aligning climate and packaging strategies. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping notes. First and foremost, the session will be recorded and available about 2 to 3 weeks from now. We encourage you to engage in the chat box to the left of your screen. Definitely encourage you to network, introduce yourself, say hello to your fellow attendees, and also feel free to ask questions of our panelists. I will try my best to get to them at the end of our talk together. And last but not least, come the end of the session, my colleague Lena is going to post a survey at the top of that chat box. Please be sure to fill it out. It's always supremely helpful for us to hear your feedback on what we're doing well and where we can improve. So appreciate that. But without further ado, welcome again to Aligning Climate and Packaging Strategies. Today, we're going to be talking about two strategic pillars that are often under the same company's sustainability strategy, carbon and packaging. These strategies, often with their own goals and targets, are inextricably linked. The right packaging material can extend a shelf life of a perishable product, saving emissions by avoiding spoilage. Selecting a more recyclable material, be it recycled PET or glass, might increase the weight of your product, resulting in higher emissions for shipping. And reusable packaging initiatives might have lower carbon footprint from the dozens of single-use packages they'd be replacing, but might increase emissions when it comes to logistics. So it's clear there's a lot of interweaving dependencies here, yet these strategies are often siloed, and that's why we're here today. I'll be hosting a conversation with 3 players across the value chain that are tackling these challenges. Jason Blake, the SVP and Chief Sustainability Officer at PepsiCo. Markus Pfanner, Vice President of Sustainability at Tetra, and Tom Szaky, founder and CEO of Terracycle. Together, we're going to be diving into how you can align climate and packaging strategies, how to understand when they're mutually beneficial, and how to navigate the trade-offs when they're not. But before we dive into our conversation, I want to zoom out for a bit and think about not just packaging, but circular principles as a whole. When we think about reducing emissions and hitting our climate goals, we are often immediately tempted to jump to renewable energy and energy efficiency. But the truth is, switching our energy to renewable sources is just 55% of the solution. To tackle our remaining emissions, we have to look at how we're producing products and the packaging that holds them. And this is part of the inspiration of this conversation. There is a huge opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by applying circular principles to how we make products and packaging. There's a huge opportunity when these two strategies don't live in silos. So to zoom out and lay the groundwork for our conversation, Gueye, lead author of the MacArthur Foundation report, Completing the Picture, How the Circular Economy Tackles Climate Change, is going to be providing a context-setting presentation about the intersection of emission reduction and circular economy initiatives. So thank you so much for joining us, Szaky. And I am going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
Yeah.
And go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, Suze, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be part of this session. Just bear with me while I load my presentation.
Absolutely.
Properly?
It is loading, but I think, yep, there we have it. And for everyone tuning in, by the way, you can double click on anyone's face or on the presentation to make it larger. So just fun tip. All right, go ahead, Szaky.
Great. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about how a circular economy for the plastic packaging sector can really help tackle climate change. And as Suze explained, I'll be basing from the findings that we created from a paper we published 1.5 years ago, looking at circular economy playing a key role in helping us meet the climate targets that we have. So yeah, when we talk about climate change, it's clear that we need to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And in order to do that, we must aim for net zero emissions. What is also very clear is that there's an urgent need for action. the ambitions that have been set today around governments are still not enough to be able to reach our ambitions. We have to increase our ambitions by 5-fold if we want to have a shot at reaching net zero emissions by 2050. A lot of the conversations that you hear today and a lot of the investments that go with regards to finding solutions are around renewable energy and energy efficiency, which are absolutely key in our fight against climate change. What we try to emphasize in the paper is that although they are key in helping us reach that 1.5 degree target, they're unfortunately not enough. And the main reason for that is that if we look at the global emissions today, around 55% of emissions come from the energy sector. And with that, we mean the burning of fossil fuels for the production of electricity and heat, but also the consumption of that energy in sectors like the built environment and transportation. That constitutes 55% of emissions today, and those emissions can easily be tackled through renewable energy and energy efficiency. The question is, what about the remaining 45%? And the remaining 45% come from the way we produce and use our goods and how we manage our land. So think of, for example, food production. Those are often overlooked emissions. And if we are going to aim for net zero emissions by 2050, we must look at the full picture. So looking not only at the emissions that are produced from the energy sector, but also the emissions that come from the production of materials like steel, cement, aluminium, and plastics, and also from food production. So the 55% is what can be tackled through renewable energy, and the 45% is what cannot easily be tackled through renewable energy. A question that we get really often is, what is it about that 45% that's so challenging to tackle? Why can't we solve this through renewable energy? So there are 4 key reasons for this. Process emissions, and here cement is a classic example. For the production of cement, it involves the calcination of limestone, which leads to the production of lime and CO2. Now, CO2 is it's part of a chemical reaction, so this is not something that can be tackled through renewable energy. A second reason is high temperatures, and here steel is a good example. To melt steel, we need temperatures that go all the way up to 1,600 degrees Celsius. To achieve those high temperatures, we're still very much dependent on fossil fuels. So although there's a lot of innovation taking place around electrification, at the moment, we're not able to scale it to the extent that we need it to be able to reach the net zero emissions by 2050, and also in a cost-effective way. So at the moment, we're still dependent on fossil fuels. Then we have end-of-life treatment, and here plastic, of course, is a great example. Here, plastic is inherently made out of carbon. The moment you burn it, incinerate it, that CO2 is released into the atmosphere. Also a problem that cannot be tackled through renewable energy, and is part of that 45%. And then the last reasoning here is deforestation and land conversion. When we burn forest, we release CO2 into the atmosphere, but also when we look at the way we produce, let's say, our crops, for example, let's say crops to create, for example, bioplastics, the way we do our agriculture degrades our soils. And so the practices disrupt our soil, releasing CO2, but also we disrupt the carbon sequestration potential of soils, so their ability to absorb carbon. And so this is also a challenge that cannot easily be tackled through renewable energy. So where does the circular economy come in? So the economy of today is a linear kind of economy. It's a take, make, waste economy where we extract resources, we'll make them into a product, we use them, and then we dispose of them. Often we landfill them and incinerate them. So it's a very extractive, polluting, and wasteful economy. And the circular economy is about shifting towards a take, make, reuse economy where materials are designed for reuse. They're designed to be kept in circulation within the economy for as long as possible. It's about decoupling economic growth from the consumption of finite resources. And so when we look at that 55%, that's something that can be tackled through the transition towards renewable energy. When it comes to the 45%, which are the emissions from our products and from, for example, food production, here the circular economy can help play a role in helping tackle those emissions by, for example, applying the 3 principles of the circular economy. So the first principle is eliminating waste and pollution. So this is about eliminating waste from your products, but also across the supply chain. So by avoiding, let's say, the production of virgin materials, which will anyways be wasted, we are avoiding emissions there, but also avoiding emissions in the landfill and incineration. By keeping products and materials in use, what we're doing is that all the energy that was kept in the making in that product is kept in circulation within the economy. And one way to keep products and materials in use is by designing products for remanufacturing, refurbishing, and repair, but also leveraging business models like sharing, leasing, and renting that increase the utilization of our products. And lastly, we've got regenerate natural systems, which is about creating healthy soils and where we can protect their carbon sequestration potential, so their ability to store carbon. So this is, in a nutshell, how the circular economy can tackle the 45%. So what does this mean for the plastic packaging sector? So in terms of the circular economy vision for the plastic sector, in basing it on these three principles, it's about eliminating or designing out all the problematic and unnecessary plastic items. It's about innovation to ensure that the plastics that we do need are reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and it's about circulation, so circulating all the plastic items we use to keep them in the economy and out of the environment. So to just give you a few examples of what that looks like from a business perspective, when we talk about elimination, I have an example here from Lock and Pop from Signode. They have literally designed out plastic packaging completely. They're using instead adhesive spray instead of wrap for their pallets. So this adhesive spray is able to bind these boxes and provide them from sliding away, but it's not too strong, so you're still able to pull them apart. So this adhesive spray allows you to reduce emissions 7 to 8 times compared to pallet wrap. And another benefit, of course, is that you reduce the total amount of solid waste, which is produced by these 10,000 pallets, from 5 cubic meters down to 0.03 cubic meters. This is just an example of what elimination as a principle could look like. And then we have reuse to show how the increased utilization of products can help contribute to reducing emissions. Is an example from the universal bottle from the Coca-Cola company, and they've come up with a shared design for multiple brands. So after having used one of their bottles, a customer can return it to the retailer. Coca-Cola then sends it to a bottling facility where they remove the paper labels, they clean it, they refill it, and then they rebrand it completely. So that reuse model allows for a 78% emissions reduction compared to single-use PET bottles, but it also allows for a decrease in 45% in water use, and it avoids the production of 1.8 billion single-use bottles in Latin America per year. And another advantage is brand loyalty. They've experienced 90% high return rate, but also 15% higher likelihood for repurchase compared to single-use formats. And lastly, recycling. Here, this is two graphs. These are graphs that are from taken from Material Economics, who wrote a report on the circular economy and industry, and we have also partnered with them when we wrote the paper around the circular economy and how it can help tackle climate change. But they've looked at the plastic sector in detail, and what you see on the left-hand side is that the processing of plastic recycled aggregates can generate more than 80% in CO2 emissions reduction compared to the processing of virgin materials. So here you see the potential for reducing emissions, and on the right-hand side you see the potential for higher revenues. This is if we create the right system conditions that enable recycling to really flourish. So this is about making sure we're able to scale to help reduce costs. It's about making sure that we have cleaner flows to optimize recycling, increasing yield. It's about increasing quality by improving collection, sorting, but also leveraging better technology. It's about increasing also the cost of virgin materials so that recycled materials can also compete better. Once you get the system conditions in place for the packaging, for plastic packaging, what Material Economics modeled is that you can increase the revenues by 71% by 2050. So just to give you an indication of the economic side of this story. And so in terms of the global opportunity, I thought I'd share a few figures there. Some of you may be already aware of the paper published by Pew Charitable Trusts. It's called Breaking the Plastic Wave, and it was published in 2019. But they've modeled these different circular economy strategies and have shown that when you apply the various circular economy strategies together, by 2040, you can see that there's a potential to reduce greenhouse gases by 25%, reduce the volume of plastic pollution entering oceans by more than 80% annually, generate savings of $200 billion a year, and also create 700,000 additional jobs. And to just give you another comparison, the paper by Mature Economics has shown an even greater reduction in greenhouse gases, going all the way up to 50%. So this is just to show you the, I guess, the variety of benefits that a circular economy can provide, and the link between circular economy strategies, helping meet and acting like a delivery mechanism to help you reach your climate targets. So yeah, thank you so much for having me here. And I think this was the presentation for today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Szaky. That gives a lot of really important context, I think, to this conversation, and how we're going to think about applying circular principles and what the kind of climate benefits can be, particularly when we're diving into packaging. So I know that Szaky might hop off, but we're going to dive into the conversation with Tom, Markus, and Jason. So to start off, I just want to take a moment to go around the horn and have you all introduce yourself. I'm going to have Jason, you start. If you could just share your role at PepsiCo and what circular packaging initiatives that PepsiCo is undertaking, as well as how they're interacting with your climate goals.
Yeah, so thanks, Sue. It's great to be with everybody. I am the Senior Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer for our North American beverage business. Want to make sure that's clarified. I think Jim Andrew, my colleague who leads sustainability for the company, joined earlier in GreenBiz. In terms of the packaging initiatives, I thought, you know, when Szaky gave the overview of the circular economy, really what we're trying to do is figure out how to make that a reality within PepsiCo, but also how to be a catalyst for the industry to bring the circular economy to bear with respect to our beverage portfolio. But as everybody knows, PepsiCo is a broad food company. So how do we bring, you know, a circular economy to bear throughout our entire portfolio? And we'll talk throughout this conversation about some specific initiatives, but I think it's important to say, you know, while the complexity of balancing climate impact and packaging is super high, no individual organization can tackle it on their own. We're committed to the things we can do within, you know, our four walls, committed to the things we can do within our supply chain, both scope 1 and 2, as well as scope 3. But then also, as I said earlier, how do we, you know, put ourselves in a position to catalyze the industry for building a circular economy? So really excited to talk about that today.
Great, thank you, Jason. Markus, let's pass off to you. If you could speak to your role at Tetra Pak, and again, what circular packaging initiatives Tetra Pak is undertaking and how they help or hinder carbon reduction goals.
Sure. No, thank you. Great pleasure to be with you. First of all, my name is Markus Pfanner. I'm Vice President Sustainability of Tetra Pak. And yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about actually the importance of addressing the packaging challenge in a holistic way. I think, as we have heard a little bit before as well, considering actually both the climate side, but also circularity. And at Tetra Pak in June 2020, we have committed to reach greenhouse gas emissions net zero across our own operations by 2030, while setting ourselves a long-term target of ambition of net zero across the full value chain by 2050. And to give you a bit of a snapshot where we are on this journey, back in 2010, back in 2010, basically we have set ourselves a climate goal to cap our 2020 impact across the full value chain at 2010 levels, right, while growing the business. And this has helped us to reduce our total emissions by 11%. Now we're ahead of the target, and this means that we're demonstrating that decoupling growth from the climate impact is actually possible. And I think this was an important step. In 2019, our renewable electricity use across our operations has been 69%. Now, 2020, we stepped up to our RE100 target of 80%, and we're moving towards 100% by 2030. Worth mentioning here probably as well as in the US, all our factories and offices are already at 100% renewable electricity today. But as we have heard before, that's not the full answer, right? And we are working basically on 4 key areas to reach our net zero greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain and in our operations. Number 1, energy related emissions, and I don't want to go a little further there, we have heard before. But further than that, really partnering with the suppliers and other stakeholders across the value chain to significantly reduce the carbon footprint, as well as accelerating the development of our low carbon circular packaging and equipment solutions. That's really a strong part in our strategy. This also helps our customers to actually achieve their emission reduction targets. And here I think it's worth to mention that our design for recycling ambitions, so to gradually reduce aluminum and plastic that are protecting the product, but with innovation, we're going to reduce that and increase the fiber content in our packages. And that is also beneficial to reach the targets and reduce the climate impact. And last but not least, also developing sustainable recycling value chains, which is really a big collaboration with customers, waste management companies, recyclers, municipalities, industry associations, and so on, is a big part. The higher the recycling, the lower basically the greenhouse gas emissions. And if you look at our footprint, according to 2019 data, 90% of our greenhouse gas emissions are actually coming from the value chain, either from the suppliers in the production of raw materials, so indeed really important, or from our customer sites where they're using our processing and packaging equipment. So therefore, we can say, to sum it up, it's really important how Tetra Pak works with suppliers, with other actors across the value chain, how we are innovating, how products and equipments are developed, and also how the end of life looks like with recycling. So all of that is contributing to a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions.
Fantastic. And there's so many tidbits I want to dive into more there, but before we do, I want to bring Tom into the conversation. Tom, working with both Terracycle and Loop, you are seeing how recycling initiatives and reusable packaging initiatives are taking off in either organization. Can you speak a bit about those initiatives and how, again, those play into climate goals for your clients?
Absolutely. And I think, you raise a really important point, which is that there is no silver bullet on the sustainability journey. We have to look at, as Markus and, has mentioned, and Jason, how do we take our existing supply chain, make it much more circular, both by material circularity and making sure we do that in a way that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And they're not always connected ideas, though generally are connected. From our point of view, at Terracycle, we view us as a waste management company, and now across 20 countries around the world, almost for 20 years, what we're focused on is first starting the journey and looking at linear products and packages, ones that don't have practical recycling solutions locally. And I think the big takeaway here is everything, almost every, I really mean almost, like 99.9% of all things we manufacture, products and packages, are technically recyclable today. The key thing we have to look at is not can it be recycled, but can garbage companies recycle it at a profit in that local area? Because garbage companies are highly fragmented. Even large waste management organizations are typically roll-ups of M&As. And so the capabilities are highly fragmented. So we have to look at that, and why that's so important is because that drives practical recyclability. I think Tetra Pak has done a brilliant job here, as well as all the work Pepsi's done in advocating for actual local recyclability to occur. From our end, we focus on, if there isn't that available, how can we then help set up national platforms to be able to practically collect and recycle until there's a local municipal recycling solution present? So, for example, with Walker's crisp packets in the UK, we do that now, until one day technology and infrastructure may come to make it locally recyclable. From there, we then look at how do we integrate waste back into products, help increase the use of PCR, but really focusing on PCR supply chains or post-consumer recycled content that is unique, from river and ocean plastic all the way to Aboriginal plastic, inner city, so on and so forth, bringing recycling solutions to those supply chains that would otherwise not benefit from them because it may just not be today economic versus the value you can sell recycled resins at, noting, of course, oil has been suppressing that value. And then Loop is a multi-stakeholder coalition bringing together 100 major consumer product companies from PepsiCo to many others and major retailers, now live actually in 4 countries. We just launched in Canada a week ago, and we have Japan and Australia coming up to bring it to a total of 6, which is all about how do we help bring out reusable supply chains from everything from fast-moving consumer goods to now QSR with the support of McDonald's all the way to Burger King, even B2B products, trying to create an ecosystem in reuse which behaves as much as recycling does. And what I mean by this is reuse ecosystems are scaled. It's not can they are. The beer system in Canada is a scaled reuse system. So is the beverage system in Germany. So is our propane tank in the United States. The challenge is you can't necessarily take your propane tank to the beer store and your beer to the propane tank place. And so, what we are trying to establish is an ecosystem where you can buy anywhere and return anywhere. Buy your shampoo at Tesco and drop it off at a Burger King, and so on and so forth. And I'd say the direct answer to your question is, it's amazing how much organizations are authentically leaning into this question and really thinking about, of course, with the big date coming up of 2025, how do we achieve recyclability, compostability, or reusability at scale by then? And I think there is a tremendous amount of challenge because the macroeconomic, winds are mostly headwinds, not tailwinds, low oil prices, poor end market, things of that nature. And, how do we also then innovate on alternative delivery methods? But people are leaning in. I think consumers are really open to these innovations. And, I think the key conclusion I would leave with on this sort of opening discussion is it's not one solve, right? We have to think about reducing packaging, making the packaging we use recyclable and from recycled content, looking at alternative ways to deliver product like reuse, and also how do we lower our net consumption altogether. And I think if we do it in an ecosystem approach like that, there's a higher chance of success.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. And as you said, it's an important thing to reiterate. There really is no silver bullet. And I think that's part of the challenge here, particularly when it comes to aligning it with climate initiatives, is that it requires many, many different strategies, and deciding which ones to prioritize at what time is part of the big challenge here. So my next question actually is for Jason. I want to dig into how you align these strategies between your climate goals and your packaging goals. I know that Pepsi has recently made announcements in the climate space. So what does that look like at PepsiCo? How do you align those initiatives, and who needs to be at the table to make that happen?
Yeah, so I think it's worthwhile to ground everyone in the climate commitments we made. So we redoubled our efforts and said we'd reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. We'd be net zero by 2040. Importantly, that's 10 years earlier than the Paris Climate Accord would have required of a company like PepsiCo. And if you disaggregate scope 1 and scope 2, that's a 75% reduction in scope 1 and scope 2. This is by 2030, and a 40% in scope 3, and then getting to net zero in 2040. So we understand greenhouse gas emission reduction is of primary importance, of which our packaging strategy and our packaging goals are a key lever for us to pull. And specifically, how do we drive recycled content into our packaging? How do we reduce our plastics use? How do we innovate in terms of new packaging, specifically things like paper bottles and things that we're going to really push on to see how we can change the construct of our overall packaging mix. I think what's important here to highlight, though, is it's important now for us to embed this in our business. So by way of background, I spent 12 years leading businesses as a GM and sales leader for PepsiCo. Now I'm leading the sustainability agenda. And that was important so that we can start to embed and systemize, this idea of sustainability. So we've piloted a program within the company called Sustainable from the Start. So that's all about reinventing a business process around innovation to ensure we're thinking of climate impact early. We're thinking of material usage early, right? It's not a thing that once we get to the point of commercializing a product, we're now asking the sustainable questions. We're doing those things from the beginning. So I think it's really important to embed process. What you probably have gleaned from this discussion so far is complexity is super high and multi-stakeholder engagement is vitally important. So when you think about things like Every Bottle Back initiative that's being driven by the American Beverage Association, that's an industry-wide initiative that says, how do we make sure we're educating consumers and making sure people understand how to recycle packages so that a bottle can come from the point of consumption and get back into the closed loop. I think I spend a lot of time thinking about this idea of the consumer experience doesn't just end when I take that last glorious sip of a Pepsi. How do I extend that consumer experience through to the point of getting that bottle back into the recycling system, and then really looking forward to consuming the next Pepsi that is made from a recycled bottle. So I think engaging the industry, engaging our peer groups, companies, as well as and I think I heard this earlier, being really thoughtful and science-based in the targets we set, right? So not just speaking to ourselves about what's possible and how we should push ourselves, but engaging outside of the four walls of PepsiCo to ensure that the goals and the metrics we're working towards are science-based. They're validated by organizations that are thinking long and hard about where we need to go. So I think it's a comprehensive approach. And, I really believe we're at a point now where we're getting past individual company heroics and getting to the point of collective action, right? I think that's what you're hearing through and through, that it's not just about the commitments we make as PepsiCo, it's about how we engage collectively to drive an agenda, not just in our supply chain, but as I said, throughout the industry and really, inspire collective action.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to take a village. So my next question is for Markus. You mentioned, as you were talking about Tetra Pak's initiatives, that you're seeing carbon emissions by reusing your materials and recycling them. I want to talk about, it's clear there that the strategies are starting to align, that your packaging and climate initiatives are being intertwined there. So I want to understand a little bit more what that looks like, how you collect the data to prove that they're benefiting each other, and how you effectively communicate it, what it takes to effectively implement that the alignment there.
Yeah, no, sure. And maybe just to pick up also, what Jason just said, I like it very much with the embedding these aspects of sustainability into the business. I think is a super important point. And if I just pick up on that, at Tetra Pak, we basically launched our new strategy 2030, which will guide our company over the next decade. And one of its central pillars is to lead the sustainability transformation, as we say, which really comprises of two goals. Number one, lead with low carbon circular economy solutions. And secondly, also enhance sustainability across the value chain, where exactly the climate and also the recycling programs are coming into play as well. To Tom's point, recycling in practice, that's where it happens, right? And picking up on that, of course, we at Tetra Pak are already on this journey, basically aiming at that are not only recyclable, but also really made fully from recycled and renewable materials that are responsibly sourced and are contributing to a low carbon future. And convenience and safety are, of course, key elements as well to this in order to enable a resilient food system. And to your point about, how do we make it visible? How do we do there? I would say typically when we are successful, our customers are successful. And if I just give one or two examples here, Maybe the first one about our carton packages, also in comparison with other options. If you take a 1 liter Tetra Pak carton package, today it's made of 70% paperboard average, 25% plastic and 5% aluminum, thin layers to protect the product inside. And a 2020 life cycle assessment, also based on comments before I hear about science-based approach, exactly that's what we need to do. And as per life cycle analysis carried out by us, also we concluded that in Europe, in milk as an example, our packages are performing better, lower carbon footprint than glass, plastic and other metal packages. And if you take that, translate it into maybe something you can relate to, you can say that if for 1 full year consumers or food producers in Europe would choose actually beverages packed in a Tetra Brick edge aseptic, one of our packages with light cap, instead of PET bottles, single use, this would save the equivalent of around 60,000 cars CO2 emissions. So I think just to give a flavor there, and this helps our customers, of course, to communicate as well and to choose good options. We're working a lot with renewable materials that we're going to increase, plant-based plastics as well, recyclable. And finally, just to mention here, really recyclability, to get back to the point of recycling in practice. There are recyclable Tetra Pak cartons where, of course, waste management systems, infrastructure for recycling is in place. If you take the US and Canada, North America, the household access in the US is more than 60%, and in Canada, more than 90%. The recovered materials then you can basically transfer into a wide range of different products. And here, I think we're mainly doing 3 things. First of all, we're continuing to work with partners across the value chain. Also, again, very important. We're also acting in the Carton Council, so as an industry, not one company alone, as an industry, to work with the collection, sorting, and baling infrastructure with the partners there to increase. We are joining forces with our existing traditional recyclers, paper mills, to expand capacity. There's also funding and also new capabilities in terms of technology and market development. And then also, again, to the coalitions, the Carton Council is very important, and also, we are there, founding member of the Recycling Partnership, the Carton Council. So also here we're uniting more than 40 leading companies to really catalyze action on the ground.
Yeah, again, good to reiterate, it takes a village of collaboration to make these effectively come to life. And I know we've talked a lot about when these things benefit each other, but I think it's really important for us to address all of the ways in which there's sometimes trade-offs, and circular packaging initiatives can result in increased carbon emissions. So Tom, my next question is for you. I know that there has been a lot of conversation around reusable packaging, and there's obviously clear benefits of reducing the amount of materials that we're using, but the logistics of shipping reusable packaging back and forth can sometimes, the math doesn't always add up. So how do you talk about that math with your clients? How do you help prioritize when reusable packaging is the right move?
So it's a really good question. And I'll preface by saying it works in some cases and it doesn't work in some cases, but I'll expand on that a bit more. And it's so important to use science-based life cycle analyses to do so. We do these internally and then third-party review them, or our partners do them on their own as well. And here's what we find in reuse, if I just sort of simplified it. If for a minute you see my screen and imagine that the vertical axis here is impact, so the higher we go here, more impact. And this axis here, the horizontal axis, is the number of times I buy the product. Now, I could be anyone. It could be, Jason buying a Tropicana bottle. It could be Markus buying one. It could be me buying one. It's just how many times that bottle is purchased, right? Doesn't matter if it's the same human being. Now, in a disposable package or a single-use package, you're going to have the same impact every time. The third bottle of Tropicana will be the same as the seventh bottle of Tropicana, and you get a horizontal line. So then the question is, let's make this pen the horizontal line, when does it move up or down? And the heavier the package is, the less recyclable it is, the higher the impact goes, and the inverse happens when you make it more recyclable, lighter, and so on and so forth. Now, reusability is different. It's not a horizontal line. Because in reuse, when you say take that same bottle of Tropicana and now move it into, say, a glass reusable bottle, that bottle is going to keep going around, which means the cost of creating the bottle it's constantly divided by the total number of uses, and as such, you get a curve effect. Now, the curve doesn't ever equal no impact, because you will always have what you just mentioned, the transportation and cleaning, the effective resetting of the pack itself. So the key question to think about in reusable ecosystems versus single-use ecosystems is, when does the curve intersect, and is that something that can be achieved or not? All right. So it's not about does it intersect, it's about is it reasonable to intersect. So there's three case examples here, simplifying. There are many pack forms that today, with just a reusable infrastructure attached to it, can have no changes at all and become reusable. Think about maybe honey packaged in glass, or salsa packaged in glass, all the way to olive oil. Many times that's in glass packaging, and there manufacturers can simply enable a reusable waste management opportunity on it, and there's no pack change. It just moved from a recycling opportunity to a to a reuse one, which means in the first use the impact is equal, but by the second use the reusable becomes better and then maintains better. It depends, could be 30% better, 50% better from a carbon point of view, depends on the exact package and the transport distances. The more common examples would be, say moving from a plastic shampoo bottle to an aluminum one, right? Where you're actually upgrading the pack to make it reusable. In that example, just because I happen to know those numbers off the top of my head, the aluminum one is worse on the first use than, say, the plastic one. It equals on the third use in that example, and then becomes better after the third use, typically by about 30–40% from a carbon point of view. And there are examples where it never becomes better. And this is the important aspect, is that, again, it's not a silver bullet. Take an absurd example. If you went from, say, a bag of potatoes in a very efficient, plastic sack to a stainless steel box, thick walled, that was the potatoes would be put into, it would never intersect, and that would be something that you would want to avoid. Now, the important part here is to measure, that intersect. Does it intersect is the first question. The second is, if it does, is it reasonable to achieve that? So if you're going to intersect at 150 uses, I would argue that's probably unreasonable to achieve, and then make the decisions, in that context. And I think it's also important to give people, choices, because people want to approach products differently. They may be consuming on the go, they may be looking e-com versus in-store, and each of those have different characteristics. But that's the simplest way to think about reuse and the LCA that is associated with single-use to reuse.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know reusable packaging is just one of these areas where trade-offs is a challenge. I'm wondering, Jason or Markus, if you could speak to material selection. When we're picking out more recyclable materials, that can again add to the weight of a product. So how do you do the internal math and make the priorities between? Do you prioritize the circular packaging initiative you might be promoting internally, or is it do you go more towards the carbon saving? What does that internal dialogue look like? Jason, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start, and I think it's important for us to bring the consumer back into this conversation, right? So yeah, as we think about how we're going to deploy, whether it's recycled material or new materials, we're constantly thinking about what's best and what's right for the consumer, right? And what consumer is at a place where they are going to appreciate what we're doing. Because right now in the US, we do have limited recycled PET. I'll just continue to use recycled PET as the material to discuss. So we want to get those materials in packages where the end consumer appreciates it, understands the value proposition, while we continue to expand the reach and impact of things like recycled PET. So yeah, I'd love to say it's a fine scientific balance of metrics of packaging versus climate. We're going to deliver the climate commitments I mentioned earlier. We're going to reduce our fossil fuel based PET. We're going to reduce all those things. We're going to do all those things, but we have to do it in a way that the end consumer appreciates it, values it, and understands the proposition that's being put forth in front of them as we work on this journey over time. So we prioritize the consumer experience first and foremost, and we'll do that for not just sustainability, but everything we do.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, rather than Markus having you answer the same question, since I know we're just coming to the end, we've gotten a really great question from the audience about the business case and how you prioritize these sustainable solutions when the cost doesn't add up. I think, cost, circular packaging, and climate priorities, these are all things you have to weigh in the balance when making these initiatives. So what does the business case look like when you're having those internal conversations?
Yeah, thanks for placing the question. Yeah, it's a good one. This dilemma is also in a way reflective of the current industry reality we are having here. While packaging plays a critical role in feeding the world, avoiding food waste, on the other side also it impacts the Earth climate and its limited resources. So we can't really afford to choose in between the two. Both are vital needs. Access to safe food, food loss, and at the other side, the preservation of nature, right? Now, having said that, I think we, at least at Tetra Pak, are on a journey, on an innovation journey, on a sustainability journey to make the different aspects happen. We don't have the luxury to choose. That requires, first of all, collaboration across the industry. I think we have heard a lot today. And secondly, also it requires investment. And Tetra Pak will invest approximately 100 million euro per year over the next 5 to 10 years to develop more sustainable package solutions. And I think that is our future.
Yeah. Well, I know we're just at time, but I do want to give Tom and Jason the chance to provide their final thoughts on the business case or any final concluding thoughts as we close out this panel.
One pass to Jason is that I think the big question that we're going to have to ask, I think there's two, in actually transitioning to these circular economy principles that you've heard, all of us speak about today, we have to keep center the economics. Recycling is driven by can garbage companies make money. Even reuse systems will be driven by can, brands and retailers maintain profit margins and so on. I think we have to really always hone centrally on economics. And then there's a greater question that we really have to ask ourselves, which is our relationship with the net amount of stuff we consume, because I don't believe that we will be able to achieve intrinsic sustainability without a massive reduction of net consumption, no matter how circular it is, because even the most circular product still has impact, still has to go around, whatever process it may be. And so I think, that's something that we'll have to think about and marinate on. But I think it will become a question that will have growing import over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, super quickly, final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I would just make two comments. One is this is going to be a full-on industry push, right? So engaging everyone we possibly can. And then two, I'd say, capital flows into sustainability are going to be vitally important, right? We're a well-funded, well-capitalized company at PepsiCo. Tom's an entrepreneur trying to make meaningful change. And I think, those who are investing need to think and help, hone in on the right metrics for how to invest in this space and fund it over time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me today. Really appreciate all of your thoughts on this really thorny challenge in the sustainability world. And thank you to the audience. Again, quick reminder, please take the survey as you're leaving. We would really value your thoughts. But otherwise, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.